Thank you all for coming to this presentation on Indiana leading the way in Achievement Wallet for all states. I'd like for my colleagues to introduce themselves, and I'll introduce myself, and I'll take y'all on a fun-filled narrative journey about my life, which I hope kind of creates the context and starts to get into the why as to why we're doing what we're doing. And why we think it's so important. So, Kacey?
I will kick us off. Hi, everybody. I'm Kacey Thorne, Director of Skills Architecture with Western Governors University. And I've had the pleasure over the last 2 years working with Darren and Alex on our Indiana Achievement Wallet project, everything related to learning and employment record and the Open Skills Network. So I've been heavily invested in skills work for the last 2 years.
And I'm Alex Kaplan. I'm IBM's global leader for all work we're doing around credentials and the transition to a skills-based economy. So I've had the pleasure of working with my colleagues here at Western Governors University on topics that relate to the enabling infrastructure for learning and employment records, how credentials can be used to transform the talent acquisition and talent management marketplace. And I also lead IBM's work with the United States government on these topics.
Thank you both. My name is Darren Hobbs. I'm the Director of Academic Records, Credentials, and Careers at Western Governors University. And I have the pleasure of getting to work with these individuals on this very important topic, something that's very meaningful to me personally. And that's because when I think about the importance of a learning and employment record and an achievement wallet, what that means to me is empowering individuals to own their records, own their credentials, and understand what those credentials mean so that they can choose and navigate their course in life as they develop their identity around professional, around education and educator, around military, around work. And I grew up in a really small town in Texas called Azle, Texas, and was not a stellar student. And my identity around professionalism started when I went to work for Kmart, the only employer in this little bitty town. And I worked in menswear department, and I could do and still can do a brilliant blue light special announcement. If any of you are interested, that was my first skill actually, was announcing the blue light specials. And for me, that was going to be my life. I was going to work for Kmart and hopefully get into the management structure where I could make some money and buy a house there in Azle. Because I didn't know any better. I wasn't, again, a stellar student. My brother, who went off to college in West Texas, told me I needed to go to college. And I said, why? He said, because you need to learn. You need to learn about the world. And I said, okay, I'll major in business since I want to work for Kmart. So I went off to college and majored in business and then learned very quickly I hated business. There was nothing about business I liked nor understood. Plus it required math, and I was not good at math. So I changed my major to psychology because there was no math requirement, and was pursuing the Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, and then realized that I had no ability to master a foreign language. So I changed my major to a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, where I was going to have to take science and math. And I was actually excited about that change in my major because I knew that it would give me a convenient and ego-saving excuse for dropping out of college because I couldn't do the math, couldn't do the science. I got 2 degrees in psychology, a master's degree in psychology, and never wanted to be a psychologist. So I went into insurance, property and casualty adjusting, because my mother was in insurance. And I did that for many, many years until I was hired at Western Governors University as a student liaison, where I worked with students and helped them to resolve their challenges. And my first aha moment around the importance of skills was when my boss, the Associate Provost of Academic Services, asked me to be the registrar. And I said, okay, I don't know what a registrar does. I remember going to their office when I was in school. She's like, don't worry about it. I can teach you how to be a registrar. What I can't teach you are the skills you already have from insurance. Your work with claimants, your ability to diffuse challenging situations. So I became the registrar. And then I got into the skills work, and I recognized the power of transferable skills and understanding what those skills were, because Stacy saw that I had skills that I wasn't even aware of. I got into what we're doing now because the universal condition, in my opinion, is insecurity, lack of awareness, self-doubt, unable to understand and connect the dots between what we learn, the courses we take, the jobs we do, and how those can potentially plug into other possibilities that we're not even aware of. My awareness was limited to my small town, my mother's background in insurance, etc. My mission through this work is to change that forever. I want individuals to understand their value, to understand the reason of their education, the skills that they are now demonstrating, and how those plug into a future of possibility and possibilities that they can't even dream of because it's not in their awareness or the awareness of those around them. But through the work of a learning and employment record and an achievement wallet, we demystify all of that. We make it transparent. We open up and draw back the curtains on infinite possibilities and empower people to be the captains of their ship, to be intentional about what they're doing and the direction they choose. And that's what the Indiana Achievement Wallet is all about, providing a technological platform to create that experience, to create that transparency, and then make it all meaningful and connect the dots through the very simple notion of skills. And I think Kacey's got something to say about skills. Can you tell us all about skills?
I can tell you all about skills, what I know and what we found out over the last little while, and where skills really fold into the equation in terms of a learning and employment record and an achievement wallet, what we're trying to do in Indiana and scale it across the rest of the United States, is it provides insights into transferability between skills where people might not see that they have a skill set that can be transferable into another career pathway or to another role, similarly to your experience with insurance and then coming into the registrar role. So at Western Governors University, we've done a lot of work around skills over the last 2 years. And one of the first things, there were a couple of things that we wanted to do. We knew that we wanted to make more skills visible to our students as they progress through their courses, as they earned their achievements. We wanted to be able to make those skills visible to them in digital credentials that we would surface to an achievement wallet. And then the last thing that we wanted to do is to provide what we call compassing capabilities. It is transparency into pathways, both career as well as education pathways. So if I have a particular career in mind, what's the delta between the skills that I have and the skills that I need? And what are education experiences, even external to WGU, that I could look at to build and acquire those new skills? So knowing that those were the three things that we wanted to accomplish early on, we stood up a team, a skills architecture team at WGU, and I very naively thought, well, I'm just going to take all of our competencies and I'm going to go out there and get the skills that are associated with them and tag them onto those competencies. Did not have any idea what that actually meant. So we worked with our partners at Burning Glass MZ to help us identify what skills might underlie all of the competencies within our programming. We've always been competency-based, but like this was our moment to really double down on this effort. So what we got back was a very large data file of a lot of keywords. that did a really excellent job about telling us what the market was signaling that they need in terms of skills for different jobs, careers, pathways, and sectors. But context is everything and lacking in that information. And so when we realized that the keywords were going to give us a North Star to where we needed to look, we had a little bit of work to do to roll up our sleeves and actually understand what the context behind those skills are. So for example, we saw communication was a top demand skill across nearly every sector. But what that looks like for an air traffic controller, for an insurance auditor, for a registrar, looks very different in practice. But those foundational communication skills can be transferable across careers when you understand what they look like and what the difference is in application. So we started developing skills. And it was about this time, as we were going on our skills journey at WGU, that we started to partner with Alex and IBM as part of a learning and employment record pilot through the White House. And as we were going through that pilot, we realized that credentials that we would be feeding into an LER ecosystem are powerful. It's so much better than resumes today. It's so much better than standard academic transcripts. There's more transparency that way, but we really saw the power and potential of the learning and employment record when you embed skills data into those credentials. What that does is it provides that transparency your learners are looking for. It provides really powerful information about the intersections of different skills across different sectors. And it provides the data that you need to compass your students into different career pathways or different educational opportunities. So it was kind of this aha moment that we had through that initial pilot about the power of skills and how they can really enhance what we were trying to accomplish with the LER ecosystem. So I think now is where I'll turn it over to you, Alex, to talk a little bit about where we are with that tech.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, IBM has a couple major interests in this. So one is, as an employer, one of the things that became apparent to us a number of years ago is that the world was moving towards a skills-based economy. And as we looked across the talent pipeline that was available to us, it became really evident that we needed to broaden our aperture in terms of thinking about how do we hire people and really focus much more on the skills that people have in addition to academic degrees, which is historically how we had looked at people. So, and the reason that we made that shift is, one, we just need more people available for us to look at in terms of the talent pool. And also, we're very focused on diversity and inclusion and looking at other populations that we've not historically been able to really focus on in terms of hiring. And this gave us another way to broaden the talent pool. So this became a really important part of our strategy as a company, and it continues to this day. So as we've gotten into it, though, there's a real challenge just technologically to pull off what the two of them are saying here around how to do this, because how do you know what a skill is? Once you have a skill, how do you know somebody really earned it? How do you share it with others? How do you use it if you're trying to hire people? How do you match it against career pathways? So there's all of these issues around skills. And so that took us down the path around thinking about an enabling infrastructure to do this. So when I was in IBM Research, I began work around what would an enabling infrastructure look like that would enable a transition to a skills-based economy at scale. So it's where we landed on blockchain as a core component of the enabling infrastructure, because artificial intelligence was already well established that we needed that. But we needed a way for people to be able to have trusted and verifiable credentials that could be shared in a self-sovereign kind of a format with others, and that people who are making consequential decisions about hiring could actually know that those credentials were real. And then, we got involved with the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board, who was very focused on this issue of making it easier to connect people with jobs. And skills are at the heart of that problem. So how do you create a national infrastructure in the United States to do that? And that's what the Policy Advisory Board was really focused on was, yeah, but how do you really do it, right? So it's one thing to talk about it as a theoretical exercise. It's a completely different thing to build it. And this is where we began working much more closely. So, we've built it collectively here. So we have the capability now to give people wallets that have their credentials in them. Those credentials are aligned to whatever job or career pathways that they're interested in. And those credentials and the career pathways are then linked to employers, and employers can use that same kind of information to look for talent, as well as to use it as part of the talent acquisition process. So the lift in terms of creating the enabling infrastructure, it's been a lot of work, and it's a very sophisticated approach. But if you're going to do it at scale, you really have to do this. Otherwise, the transition can't happen. I mean, just like we went through when we brought in place electronic medical records, you know, it's a very, you know, kind of similar kind of exercise that has to happen at the national level. And it's happening at the global level as well. So everywhere in the world, you're seeing academic institutions move their credentials online. You're seeing the rise of digital identity, governments driving to give people better control of that information so that they can make decisions and others can make decisions based upon that information. So it's great to be doing it in Indiana because, you know, it all happens locally, right? You have to have this national infrastructure, but at the end of the day, you've got a community of people with employers, academic institutions, other skills-based providers, and they live and work in a particular place. And so, you know, thanks to Western Governors and the grant from the Lilly Foundation, we're able to actually bring this to real life in Indiana.
And the thing I enjoy, well, I won't say enjoy most about the project because I love it. Every component of it is just, it's so powerful, and what we are going to be able to get into the hands of every learner worker, owning their own career, owning insights, opening up access and opportunity and transparency into those pathways is huge. To do that for every learner worker, we've had to be really cognizant of making sure that what we are building with the technology is predicated on the use of open standards, so that you're not building a silo that's going to make it difficult for those learners to progress across, you know, state lines or institution lines. So we have all had that commitment to using the open standards to be able to make that data transferable, shareable, and extensible now beyond Indiana.
Right.
I think that's a really important point to make. The open data standards is how we're able to make sure that all of the information that is now in the control of a learner can be moved around and not run into roadblocks and hurdles, regardless of a system, an ERP, an HRIS system, a student information system. The information needs to flow, and open data standards is very important. It's the key to this. But also, we're not building something that is a closed system. It's all open architecture as well. It's an open system. So our partners in this project, which we need to call out because they're so key to our success, the National Student Clearinghouse, for example, that can provide and plans to provide a public good wallet, a perpetual wallet, because in this ecosystem there can be many wallets. But a learner needs a place to always go home in the event they are between jobs, and so now they don't have access to an employer-provided wallet, or they're getting a job but they're no longer with their school who provided them a wallet for that experience. The public good wallet will always be there. Similarly, the Hyperledger blockchain technology, there's different flavors of blockchain, but Alex, I believe we've successfully demonstrated that that's not a problem, right?
Correct.
We can connect and cross that barrier so that a learner who is from North Dakota that uses Hyperledger Indy, those records can still be discovered within the ecosystem even through the Hyperledger we're using, which is Fabric.
That's right.
No problem. The military's doing, I think their stuff was Microsoft Azure's blockchain. So the open architecture aspect of this is also critical to the success because we're not building a proprietary product, we're building an ecosystem that can span the nation, possibly the world. That is important. But we're also in partnership with Skillful Indiana, a project of the Markle Foundation, because we recognize that no matter how cool this tech is, and it's cool, we're talking about people. So the element of people is just as important. In my personal story, I named off a few individuals that kind of influenced my rather random journey through life. My mother's background in insurance, the individual that asked me to be the registrar. This technology has to meet people where they are at. And that could be individuals that are uncomfortable with tech. That could be individuals that, hey, this super cool app for my phone, but I'm facing childcare challenges or food insecurity or housing issues, transportation issues. So we're also providing a wraparound community of care as a part of this project that consists of job coaches, mentors, support services from like Goodwill, which is another one of our partner, Goodwill Excel Center, who's participating with us in this project that also provides a community of care services to address things like food insecurity, housing, et cetera. This is also equally as important that individuals be supported by the technology, by the community of care, in order to maximize their fullest potential. So it's also part of this project because that is critical.
I would say it's even the most important component. I mean, you can have the best tech in the world
And we
to
do.
solve this problem, and we do.
Yeah.
We absolutely do.
We do.
You can have the best tech to solve the problem, but what the technology can't do is, like you said, provide transportation. The technology can provide insights into opportunity, but it can't remove the barriers for me to have access to that opportunity. And so this community of care component is a really big one that we are extremely passionate about. And if I did have a favorite part of what we're doing in Indiana, it's that. Because there are still some significant, I think, social support systems, policy systems that need to be addressed in order for this tech to really make a change for learner workers.
I also think it's interesting because it brings together a sort of a different fabric of organizations that are participating in it, right? This isn't just about, academic to business. We're really bringing in, because we have a social services dimension to it, we have an academic dimension to it, there's an employer dimension to it, there's an individual dimension to it. So it sort of mixes it up, which I think is a really interesting aspect to it, because many of these programs historically have been focused on just sort of one direction, like academic institution to employer, right? Or individual to social services. But when you get into a community and you're trying to build what we're doing in Indiana, you really are trying to integrate all of these kinds of different services against a whole range of organizations, all of who are trying to collaborate. And the focal point is the person. So this is really about how do you bring information together, put it into the hands of a person such that they can then navigate this very complicated landscape that's out there. So it requires, I think, a real shift in perspective in terms of the ecosystem in which we're playing when you really start to engineer this together. And it gets us out of this, I think, this sort of one-directional kind of interaction that's occurring to something that's really much more multifaceted. And so the technology, enables that, as we've all seen through the rise of social media. I mean, you can think of all this point-to-point stuff, and we're sort of laying this into all these issues about employment. One more point I wanted to make here, just in terms of the infrastructure, is just the importance of privacy and data security in all of this. And I think it's always really important to keep that really at the forefront here. We are talking about people's data about their jobs, about their career aspirations, about the degrees that they've earned, and it has to be under their control. And we wanted to avoid at all costs having that in a centralized database. So we had to adopt a technology that allowed that respect for what we call self-sovereign identity to be in the control of the individual themselves. Another really significant shift here, because learning from the experience of the last number of years, people want to control their data, and they have the right to, and they should be empowered to do that. And it should not end up in some kind of centralized world. And from a government public policy perspective, that's something that is really, really important to policymakers.
So you said people want to control their data, and people want to own their record is
Yep.
the other side of this. And now, I was the registrar at Western Governors University for quite some time, and now I refer to myself as Registrar Emeritus. Make it a thing. It's not official, but help me to make it a thing. Learners want to own their record, because in the old way, and now mind you, I'm coming from a registrar's perspective, so this is kind of heretical for me to say this, but giving someone a transcript that shows just courses and grades, including bad ones like my undergraduate transcript has, what does that really, what are we doing? How does that serve anyone? The transcript was built simply as a means of communicating from one school to another. That's all it was meant for. But by putting digital credentials of achievement into the hands of learners, letting them pick and choose how they want to curate those credentials, those achievements, into a unique record packet that speaks specifically to an opportunity, cutting out all of the noise and nonsense. Also adding self-attestations and portfolio evidence. It empowers individuals to craft their unique skills and talent brand. Again, further empowering an individual to tell their story, to create their narrative, and have N versions of these unique record packages based upon whatever they're pursuing at the time. I think that's equally as important about owning your data, owning your credentials. And plus, I'd like to get out of the business of transcripts. It's silly. It's a waste of time. You know, the other thing I wanted to circle back to was I want to get back a little bit to skills, because I think that what's powerful, it may seem obvious, but what's powerful by speaking that common language and creating then alignments between things that may seem disparate, like a credential and a job description or a job role, is that the technology can now surface to the individual how I qualify. If there's a gap, what is it? Where can I go and find a short course, small course offering or micro-credential to shore up that gap? But also, since I'm interested in this, what jobs are available?
What jobs are available? What does the market look like, in my region? Like, what does it look like that's close to me versus, nationally? What is the market looking like?
And can't we also also show maybe what salary ranges are? And
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I had another aha experience, because I was privileged enough to listen in on a student focus group where one individual had that moment of insight and took WGU competency statements and was using the language found therein to incorporate into their cover letter and their resume, and was finding great success at landing employment opportunities by using that vocabulary. And the other learners, and myself secretly listening in on the call, were like, I could have had a V8. I never thought of that, because I don't know how to talk about my learning.
Yeah.
Through this tech, through skills-denominated credentials, we can make obvious to learners the vocabulary of their learning so they can talk about it.
That's a really good point, and if I may, I know that we are eager at some point here to engage in a dialogue with all of you around this, so we want to leave time for that, but I would like to hear from you two on a couple of things, but maybe what we can do is just put a bow on what is this thing. What is the Indiana Achievement Wallet? And it is a wallet with skills-denominated credentials that a learner can curate what credentials go into it so that they can craft that story that they're wanting to tell to potential employers. It's going to give them compassing information about jobs, salary, market demand for their skills, geolocated to where they are. And it's going to do all of this in a way where those credentials are portable and verified. And it's launching October in Indiana, and it's just the beginning. Indiana is state one, and we need to expand. We need to do it quickly for the sake of our workforce, for the sake of every learner worker. So my question to the two of you is, what do we need to make that happen? Like, what is next? What are the things that we need now? The tech is here. Like, it's here. What do we need? What are things that need to be moved out of the way for us to be able to get this into the hands of more learners?
So I'll talk about the employer side, and maybe you can talk about the academic side. Because the other thing with the Indiana Achievement Wallet from an employer perspective is the ability then to see the pipeline in their community for people who have the skills and the ability to fill the jobs that are coming. And so one of the important things is to work the employers so that they start to infuse the whole skill-based concept into their talent acquisition and their talent management practices. So they understand what skills do their current employees have, what skills are required to be successful in a job, how do they help people progress through their career by understanding the skills that they have and how well aligned they are to the jobs of the future. So I think working with the employer community on a whole skills-based discussion is equally important once we can provide this kind of information.
So academically, we need people to define their credentials and make them skills denominated, and the learning outcomes need to speak the common language. And I don't know how many of you are fellow academics, but it leaves me a little dry in my mouth to just say that. I want to take it a little bit more personal to each of us in the room. What we need to make this successful is you. We need you to be passionate about this, to be acolytes in this vision of making all of us better by empowering us to own our credentials, to curate our unique skills and talent brand, to see the value of a community of care that can guide us along our journey through life so that we don't feel alone, so that we can understand our value, our place, so that we can answer the question that I still ask myself, although, let me say, because my boss is in the room, I love what I'm doing right now, but I still ask myself, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I'm hoping that this experience, this project, this ecosystem can start to answer for all of us. What do you want to be when you grow up? Where do you want to go next? What do you want to do next? That's what I need y'all. We need you to share in this journey.
So I agree wholeheartedly, and I want to put even more like of a fine point on this too. What do we need in terms of policy? Like, I'm thinking, Department of Commerce, I am thinking Title IV. Like, what are some of the things that way that in order for us to really make this sing across the states, what do we need?
Yeah, so in September 2020, the U.S. Department of Commerce issued a report on learning and employment records and creating an LER infrastructure for the United States. We need that acted upon. And we need the Department of Commerce to act upon it, and we need them to start to put in place policies that encourage the federal government to do skills-based hiring. We need them to provide resources to the states to fund the creation of the LER infrastructure because there's genuine technical work. We need Commerce to be an exemplar to the business community in the United States about how to shift towards a skills-based economy. We need them to work globally in collaboration with similar projects underway in Europe and Australia, initiatives from the World Bank. So there's a lot of important policy work at the federal level, and I think that the white paper, and I was one of the authors of it, I think that the white paper did a really good job of articulating from a policy perspective. We need government to accept these credentials for reporting purposes, to streamline reporting and regulatory requirements for participants, and we need the same thing at the state level.
So I show that we're coming up on about 10 minutes left in the session. So I think at this point, if there is interest, we're happy to do some Q&A. Or Kacey and I have prepared a dance routine for the remainder of the time, if that's more desirable. But I
Do
want
me a
to.
solid, not that, not that.
I want to thank you both before we get into Q&A. It is a privilege and an honor to get to work with you on this project. So thank you
pleasure.
so much. So,
And there's a mic, I think, that will come around too,
Yeah.
so if you've got a question.
Is this working? No.
It's for the internet feed, so.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. So as much as I want to see Kacey dance, I had a question about around the immutability of blockchain, because I think like if I have a record from a leadership skill that I earned in the military, that's great for my wallet. If I earned it in the Japanese military in 1939, that's something I want off my wallet. And so how do you get around that? I know we're talking about curating, but can you remove records?
So on blockchain, everything is permanent and immutable. However, as an individual, you have the right not to display it and not to share it. There also are ways technically to request that it no longer be made visible. So yes, what we're doing is GDPR compliant, and it's also compliant with the emerging regulatory environments in the United States and around the world. But ultimately, what we really want to do is empower people to decide whether to share that information or not to share that information. It isn't generally available.
Great question.
Hello, my question is, now when it comes down to the credentials, how much of the data is dynamic versus static? And so when a student, or is a student issued a credential once they complete a certain course, or are there plans to add measures that follow a student along their academic journey and sort of define skills that they pick up along the way?
I mean, we think about credentials as a continuum, and so it's incredibly dynamic, and it really has to do more with the issuing organization, what level they issue the credential, when they issue them. They can revoke them, credentials can expire, people can self-attest to them. So I think you think about it that way, as a continuum, not like a fixed object, right? Now we think about credential, we think about like a driver's license or a diploma. But the way the world is moving is that all those kinds of concepts are becoming, quote, credentialized.
I would add to that, just from the work that we've done at Western Governors University and thinking about our own skills aligned to different credentials and skills that are aligned to job roles, like we know in some sectors that it is changing almost by the minute. What the high demand skills are, they shift and they change. And so we recognize that early on, and through some of the work that we're doing with the Open Skills Network, there's a lot of opportunity here, I think, again, for a large community of employers, higher ed, military, to come together and really define what those skills are and work towards solutions and technology that can help us keep those things updated, because it's common for professional taxonomies and frameworks to get outdated fairly quickly. And so it's a problem we're working to solve with OSN.
And if I could just add one more quick thing to that. So good examples of this are the cybersecurity frameworks for the National Institute on Cyber Education. That's a great example of that kind of work. Another good example is the work that the United States Navy is doing on the MilGears project, which is the translation of military service member skills into civilian careers.
As the early startup founder that is starting to gain traction and really wants to get involved with what you guys are doing, we measure, we provide feedback, we do that cool stuff. How do we get involved with you guys so that our information is being useful for this project?
let's talk after this and exchange contacts.
I would also say, if you haven't, definitely get in touch with us about the Achievement Wall at work, but I would highly encourage any interested in this room to engage with the Open Skills Network. A lot of the work that we are bringing to life as part of this is stuff that the OSN is driving forward as well. So,
And then on the really heavy-duty technical architecture work, there's a community in IEEE that's focused on this.
So aside from the blockchain component, how is this not LinkedIn? Or how is this different from what LinkedIn is doing and has been doing for a while?
So that's a good question, and I'll take a stab at it first. I think probably the big difference for me, again, coming from a records perspective, is the verifiability, the validity of the record, as opposed to what I would consider, and I'm not trying to minimize what LinkedIn has done, I'm compelled by what they do, but I don't know how much I trust what is happening there in terms of the quality of the learning, the rigor, the actual skills or competencies that could be mastered and demonstrated. Also, this open architecture means that these credentials can flow in from many different places, including LinkedIn. So it's not just my records that are flowing in or my credentials from Western Governors. It's from everywhere. So as a holder of credentials, you'll be able to see these credentials from all over the place that you have been earning as you move through life. I see that as a big difference. Are there others that?
I think what I would say about that is more about the infrastructure. It really creates this really amazing opportunity for private sector and innovation with this kind of data. Like, how can we, what can we build, what can we create to make that data more dynamic or informative for learner workers? And I think, you know, there are plenty of applications that can leverage this kind of information, like LinkedIn, you know, like even Indeed and some of the other hiring sites, I think, can really tap into what's being done here to improve upon approach and product.
So if you think about it like in electronic medical records, you know, there are a lot of applications built on top of electronic medical records. We're creating the comparable infrastructure for skills that exist for electronic medical records, so that that data can be used for consequential decisions about hiring, all sorts of kinds of things. I mean, we're not focused on creating, you know, social engagement with people. We want people, when they apply to Western Governors University, to be accepted, to be able to provide a verifiable credential that they graduated, and that it's a legally binding attestation on which Western Governors can make a decision. So think about our ability, as an example, to offer college enrollment to every high school student in a region based upon having a verified high school diploma. They can't do that off of LinkedIn. They have to know definitively that that diploma belongs to that individual who graduated from that high school, and they could automatically make a college admissions offer based on it. So that's one of the really important distinctions.
Good question.
Hmm?
Thanks. This is a great talk. I was talked into going into by this lady, and it's probably the best one I've attended. So I'm at University of Colorado Boulder, was an IBMer at one time. We're using Kymberly, and I don't know how that relates yet, because I'm putting this together.
I do.
Okay. Well, that would be my second question, if you're willing. And then, but you know, as a faculty member, it's very difficult to write down skills in your learning outcomes. And so I asked the Kymberly, or not the Kymberly guy, but the guy on campus in the registrar's office how to do it. And he just goes, well, that's your job. And I was like, it's more difficult than you think. Do you have any advice on that, on how to write a skill? I teach management, by the way.
So before Kacey tells you how to write a skill.
No, I mean, how are you all defining it, really?
Yeah.
It's very difficult. It's non-trivial.
I'm gonna let Kacey answer, and then I'll follow up with a little hint about the future.
Yeah.
So I had a moment 2 years ago when I took this role for WGU that I felt the same way that you did. It was like, what is a skill? There is not a common definition for what that actually means, what it means to higher ed is different than what it might mean in vocational training, what it might mean in I'm at a loss for words, but nobody has the same labor market data, right? And so when I was thinking through what is a skill, I remember being in a room with my boss, with our provost, and I was like, look at this work that I did. I figured it out. And I flashed up what I believed to be skills onto the board, and they were a bunch of keywords. And everybody in the room was like, that's not a skill. And I was like, well, MZ says it is. Like, what do you mean? And that's when I knew we had some work to do. And so when we at WGU think about a skill, what we mean is those keywords. What we mean is a statement that actually describes what the performance of that word looks like for a particular job role and sector. And then a bunch of other, I'm going to get a little bit nerdy here, metadata that you can associate with it, like job roles, like dynamic labor market data, into a nice little data package that we call a rich skills descriptor. And so this is a lot of the work that the OSN is doing right now, is for that community to come together and to really start to build skills, open skills, out into the market that we then can use to tag to our syllabus, to tag to job descriptions, to tag to digital credentials. Because we recognize that there is not a common definition. It is really hard to find that data. And so we need, if we really want skills-based hiring and ed to take off, we've got to solve this together that way.
If you're not a member of OSN, you might think about it, because I think in the not too distant future, the OSN is going to be made privy to some development that's been done that we'll be able to read a course description, read a job description, find or identify what the robot thinks are the actual skills contained therein, and then align them to libraries and say, here's our best suggestion as to how you want to take this and define it this way, and making it a lot easier so that your faculty, do they write learning outcomes? Can you get them to?
You do.
Yeah.
You're supposed to.
Yeah.
And, but that's, I know this, and I know this,
Yeah.
and I know that,
Yeah.
they're still at that level.
And
So
then the work we're doing is to do this at scale across billions of skills. So that's a whole other conversation. But if I could just quickly say on Credly. So there are many organizations like Credly that issue badges and credentials. They're not, but keep in mind, what they're doing is they're issuing a manifestation of an attestation that your institution is made. So you said, it's like IBM issues credentials all the time, but IBM is we say this person has that skill, and then we ask Credly to issue a badge.
Okay. So that works with the systems you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are over time. If you have any remaining burning questions, I think we can hang out for a little bit longer. But thank you all so much for coming and listening to us. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.